Hello everyone and welcome to Mathematics. So this video will focus on chapter 5, probability distribution, and let's aim ourselves to learn two things from this video. Alright, so as usual, I'll give you a few seconds to go through the questions first. Alright, so for part A, they did a survey and it focuses on people in Kampung Perdana, and they are focusing on teenagers, right? So for part A, they found out that the mean of number of teenagers is around 150. So what this means is Kampung Perdana, maybe Kampung Perdana is a big area, so they split it into areas. So let's say area A, the number of teenagers is 140. Then area B, number of teenagers is 160. So if I average them together, it will be 150, right? And the standard deviation is 9.5. Apologies for the interruption, because I would like to change my way of explaining standard deviation. Alright, so we know that the standard deviation is 9.5, but if we only focus on this situation, this number doesn't give any meaning unless we are comparing another kampung's standard deviation. Okay, let's say the other kampung, let's say Kampung Menteri, the standard deviation is 2. So this means that the areas in Kampung Menteri, and if we focus on the number of teenagers for each area, okay, let's say example, area A, number of teenagers is maybe 150. The other kampung is only 149. So you can see the differences between these two areas, they are quite small. But for Kampung Perdana, because the standard deviation is big, so maybe give you an example, let's say area A has 150 teenagers, but area B has 200. So you can see the differences between areas is quite big compared to Kampung Menteri, right? So this is the usage of standard deviation. But again, just looking at this case, this number is just a number to us. There's no significance or no meaning into it. So the probability of a resident is being categorized as a teenager is probability P. Alright, probability to select a teenager is P. So we need to find the value of P. So before we find the value of P, we need to understand for this situation, should we use the binomial distribution or the normal distribution? So we can determine this by looking at this sentence, probability of being categorized as a teenager. So this means there are only two possibilities. One, categorized as a teenager, or not a teenager. So this case we have two possibilities. So for distribution which handles two possibilities is actually binomial distribution. Right? So here our question gives us the mean and standard deviation, so we can use the formulas for these two in binomial distribution to help us find the probability. Right? So this is the formula. Mean is n times p, standard deviation is square root npq. So what does npq represent? So n is number of trials, meaning how many times we repeat the experiment. P is probability of success. So here success means we chose or we chose a teenager out. Failure means we chose not a teenager. Okay? So P and Q, they're actually opposite of each other, so if we add them together, it will be equal to 1. Alright, so now let's use the details we got here. So NP will be equal to 150, and square root NPQ will be equal to 9.5. So if you notice, for the first equation, this is NP, and second equation, there is also NP. So what you can do is to sub this 150 inside here. So this NP will cancel off, become 150. So this will be the next line. So here will be 150Q, and the square root, I can move it to the right side, so it will square this value from 9.5 to this. And 150, I will move it to the right side, so we will obtain this value. So now this is Q, but what we want to find is P. So here we need to 1 minus Q, right? So if we calculate this, we will get 0.3983. 0.3. So this probability means that if I select a resident, there is a 40% chance that this person is actually a teenager. Alright, so moving on to part B, if we choose 10 residents from Kampung Perdana, find the probability that more than 2 residents are not teenagers, right? Not teenagers. So to find probability, we need to go through these 4 steps first, right? So the first step is we need to determine our random variable. So here I would put it as number of teenagers, because here if you look at the first sentence, it says mean number of teenagers, and the standard deviation also describes number of teenagers, and the probability also describes teenager, right? So I will put number of teenagers instead of not teenagers, right? So step 2, which is to determine the distribution. So in part A1 we already knew this, so the distribution will be binomial or B. And step 3, we need to find the value of n and p. So n we can find it from this question, which is 10, because if we want to determine whether the resident is a teenager or not a teenager, we need to repeat this 10 times. Okay, so we choose one resident out and we determine is this a teenager or not a teenager. So we need to repeat 10 times because we have 10 residents. And the value of p will be the value from part A1, which is 0.3983. And step 4, which is to find the probability. So this is one thing we need to know, and it's quite important. So our objective now is teenagers. But if you go back to the question, it says not teenagers. So the point of view is different. So what we need to do is to translate the question's point of view to our point of view, from not teenagers to teenagers. Right? So what we can do is I will list out all the possibilities for not teenagers first. So here I will list out from 0 to 10. A maximum is 10 because we can only choose 10 residents. Right? And then I will translate it to teenagers. So let's say this case is 0 not teenagers, but this means all of them are teenagers, so here will be 10. So if one of them is not teenager, means 9 of them is teenager, and so on. So going back to the question, here it says more than 2 residents, so the probabilities that we need to count would be from 3, because it's more than 2, to 10. So if we translate back to teenager point of view, we need to calculate from 0 to 7's probability. So actually we need to calculate 8 probabilities, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But here will be a bit troublesome because no way we would calculate all the possibilities one by one. We have 8 possibilities we need to calculate. So a shortcut is we can first consider the probabilities of all these numbers, which is actually is 1, because we included all the possibilities. Then we minus off those we don't want, because if you look at this table here, those we don't want is actually 3 possibilities only: 8, 9, and 10 teenagers. So what we can do is we use the probability, which is 1, which includes all the possibilities, minus out the possibilities that we don't want, which is 8, 9, and 10. So I'll write it in this way: P probability where x is more than or equal to 8. So this means we need to minus out where x equals to 8, where our x equals to 9, and our x equals to 10. Right? So to find the probability, we can use this formula. So here, if r equals to 8, this means that NCR would be 10C8, because from 10 residents, 8 of them are teenagers. Okay, then we will multiply p power of r, so p is actually 0.3983. So since we have 8 of them are teenagers, so we need to multiply this value by 8 times, so we need to power by 8. And we need to multiply this, which is the probability of those which are not teenagers. So here would be 1 minus 0.3983, and we need to multiply 2 times, or power of 2. because we only have 2 of them which are not teenagers. So same goes to px equals to 9 and px equals to 10. The r was sub 9 and here our r was sub 10. Alright, so once you calculate all the values, the probability will be 0.9881. So it's quite a high probability for this case. Alright, so let's go to part B. So they are changing the focus